So welcome to the HR Huddle. For those that don't know, I'm Eloise Shelton of Vanilla Recruitment. We recruit in office, accountancy, HR and marketing roles. So today we're joined by Tillie Newnham, of...
Newnham, it's a tricky name, it's ridiculous.
And today's session is on positive psychology and how we can develop a positive culture. So the session's going to run for an hour. It is recorded, so if hopefully everybody's okay with that. Tillie is happy for you to unmute yourself as you're going along if you've got a question that you want to ask, but do feel free to put it in the chat box as well if you're not comfortable with that, and I can interrupt and ask her as we're going along. So we want to get through as many questions as people have got and to have an interactive session. So thank you very much for joining us, and I will pass you over to Tillie.
Lovely. Thank you, Eloise. So, hi, I'm Tillie. As Eloise said, I want to talk to you today about positive psychology, but with a lens on how we can really apply this at work and make how this can help us have really great cultures. I'm just going to bring up my slides, but I first learned about positive psychology at a coaching session. So I was part of a group of L&D practitioners who went to this coaching group to learn, to sort of continue our development. And someone brought up positive psychology and it hit home so quickly for me and really inspired me. So I'm hopeful that I can do that for some others today as well and sort of bring some inspiration. So a little bit more about me. I always think it's important to go, why should you listen to me? What have I got to actually say that's important? So this is what I would sort of say is my sort of purpose. I'm really passionate about helping people and organizations, and I mean people first, very much through this having great engaging cultures, compassionate leadership, and some processes that actually support employees to grow. And this was sort of a snapshot of my career. And I started around that 2012 point. I started working before then, but I think this was the point where I started really harnessing it in this direction that I'm going, which has this focus on culture and organizations. And I'm currently doing a positive psychology qualification. I'm the sort of person who, to say to a company, I'm an expert on this, I want to be able to go, and here's the proof. So I have been doing a qualification in this, which has been really valuable. And I'm excited to share this with you all. My sweet spot is small business, but all of this can apply to larger businesses as well. It's just my favorite area is that small business. And as Eloise said, I really would love people to contribute to this, because I'm conscious that as humans, you all have brilliant professional experience that you can bring to this as well. And so I'd love to hear the great things you're doing around these topics we talk about today. So please feel free to share that experience if you prefer in the chat, or if you want to be outspoken. I love that. So however feels comfortable for you. So positive psychology. When I share a slide, there'll be some writing. I'm going to give a pause so you can read it. My brain can't do two things at once. So I'm going to let people read what I pop on slides and then do some talking as well. So I'll let you have a moment with that.
Neither can mine.
I really can't. So if we think about traditional psychology, typically it focuses on addressing mental illness, what's seen as dysfunctions. It's focused on when there is a problem to solve, when someone is not operating at their optimal level. What positive psychology does is actually emphasizes on what makes life worth living. And it does it through these sort of concepts such as happiness, resilience, personal growth. And it's this idea that actually, if we focus on there's not a dysfunction or a mental illness happening, if we focus on people at that regular level, how can we enhance their lives? How can we make their lives even better and make them feel like they are living a good life as they define it? So my objective today is to help you understand some key positive psychology concepts, and then get you thinking about how you can apply this. To do this, we're going to start with some history of some really key thinkers in positive psychology. And there's 6 I've pulled out that I really want to intentionally share with you, because there's a lot of thinking that's gone into this. And this is only a flavour, but it's the flavour I think is most relevant today to help us bring this into organisations. So we have to start with Martin Seligman. I'll let you read the little blurb. Seligman is a very important place to start because he is seen as the father of positive psychology. This was a theory he brought about in the year 2000. So this theory is only really coming up to 25 years old, which is quite young for a psychology theory. His work, however, began in the late 1960s, where he was working. I don't like this aspect, but he was working on an experiment involving dogs and giving dogs electric shocks to monitor what their behavior would do. Not a nice topic. He no longer works with animals, I'm assured. But what he discovered through that experiment was that actually the dogs where they'd been conditioned to experience pain had also developed this other condition where they wouldn't take opportunities to escape. So you would think these dogs that are being tortured in a way, if there was an opportunity to escape, would they not take it? But they'd been so conditioned to that if they did something, they'd experience pain, that they didn't. And Seligman started to research this against humans as well. And this is where this theory of learned helplessness comes from, this idea that actually experiences we have, trauma we might experience, can lead us to act and behave in a way where we truly believe we are helpless. And his beliefs were that actually this could be reversed. You could help people through positive psychology to develop more positive emotions, intent, beliefs, optimism, and sort of lead them on that journey. And in 2011, his theories evolved further to create the PERMA model, which we're going to look at in a moment. And he sees it as a model for well-being. We know that we talk about well-being a lot at work, so this is very relevant. And the PERMA model, each letter stands for a different aspect. So in this model, P stands for positive emotion, the power of those emotions. And we come back to this because another of our key thinkers really focused in on emotions. The E is for engagement, that bit where we're so engaged in something we're doing, we love it, we're passionate, and it brings us joy to be engaged in it. The importance of relationships around us, so those close relationships, people that have meaning build us up. M stands for meaning in itself, so that why am I here? Why am I doing this? What does this mean for me? You know, a very obvious way to connect it into organizations, that what's the purpose of the organization? Am I contributing to something? And finally, A is for achievement. Actually, as humans, we like to feel that we are growing and achieving our targets. This helps our well-being. So when we're thinking about applying this into organizations, I've done this on each slide, and it's just quick snapshots of where this could really add value. So interpersonal relationships at work, you know, if these are things that are important for well-being, actually having great relationships at work are a really important factor. And this is evidenced by Gallup and many other sources as well. How do we recognize and appreciate people? So that builds those relationships, that positive emotions, but also awarding that achievement side for people. Giving them challenging work so they feel engaged. Our company purpose, as I said, what's that meaning for me to be here and do this? So those values as well. And having personal growth, how are we developing? So the next one, I've had to phonetically look up how to say this name, but you may be familiar with them already. This is Csikszentmihalyi. I'm hoping is bang on correct, but Csikszentmihalyi. So I'll let you have a read of this, and this might already be something you're aware of.
That's impressive, Tillie. Very impressive.
I was like, to be prepared, I was like, I need to know how to say this. So Csikszentmihalyi is best known for his research on flow, which might be familiar for some of you already. But he was with Seligman. When Seligman launched this in 2000, he did this with Csikszentmihalyi, and he viewed him as the leading researcher in positive psychology. And that flow model is really important because Csikszentmihalyi believed people were happiest when they were in a state of flow, a state which he defined as being where we're so involved in an activity that nothing else matters. I quite like those moments where you go, oh, I've got 20 minutes, I'll do this task. And then 30 minutes later, you look up and go, oh God, where did the time go? I'm late for my meeting. I always feel like it's quite a nice reason to be late for a meeting. It's like, I was just so enjoying what I was doing. I was in flow. And that's a state that Csikszentmihalyi believed we all valued. And this is the model that it was based on, this idea that, you know, you had two axes of challenge and skill. And where we had a high challenge level matched with a high skill level, an individual could really experience that state of flow, versus if there wasn't much challenge and skill was low, it would be apathy. So I just can't be bothered to get involved. How does this apply in our organizations? Challenging work. So we go back again to that wanting to have achievement, wanting to have engagement. Challenging work, people actually like to be challenged at the right skill level. They like to be stretched out their comfort zone and keep growing. So job design, how are we designing jobs that allow people to get into these states? Again, their engagement at work. People who are experiencing flow more often are likely to be more engaged employees, and they're going to be growing in their careers, which, you know, there is so much out there around how important this is to individuals, reasons for leaving jobs. Career growth is one of those key, lack of personal growth is one of those key areas. So Carl Rogers, we've got a bit more blurb here, so I'll let you have a good read on this one, but he's a really interesting individual from my point of view. So Carl Rogers actually predates Martin Seligman. It's a much, much older theory, and actually around the same time as Maslow, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow and Rogers were in the same sort of phase of psychology, which is known as humanistic psychology. But positive psychology is very much built on those foundations and evolved this. And the theories are really lovely and I think really suitable for the work world. And I'd love to talk about his self-concept theory. And this is one that resonates for me really strongly. So what Rogers believed was for us to be living the good life, which, as Rogers defined it, the good life is that we experience the highs and lows of life, recognizing they're the highs and lows of life, that we need to have what he called congruence in our self-concept. So what that means is we've got our three circles here. Self-concept is that ideal self, the who we want to be, the bit where you grow up going, and for me, I can be very vocal on this. For me, it's really important. I can look in a mirror at the end of the day and say, I'm a good person. That is my ideal self. If I can say I'm a good person and feel it, that's my self-concept, my ideal self. Self-efficacy is how we actually perceive ourselves though today. So who we want to be and who we actually think we are can be very different things. And our self-esteem, where it's low or whether it's high, can play into this as well. If we have high self-esteem, we're likely to be closer to who we want to be. If we have low self-esteem, we might not be believing we're who we want to be. And Roger posited that where your self-concept, your current perception of yourself and your self-esteem overlap, you're going to experience congruence, you're going to feel good, you're going to feel like you're living that good life. But if those areas are separated, you're going to have incongruence, you're not going to feel settled. You'll have statements like, I just don't feel like myself right now. So this model is very much about authenticity. Where we have this overlap, we're going to feel like our authentic selves, which is very popular at the moment in kind of this world of work and wanting people to be able to bring that to work. I have a great example of this. A previous business I worked in, I was being told all the time I was doing a great job, and I was doing a great job, but I was doing work that made me feel a bit evil. So I wasn't looking in the mirror at the end of the day and saying I'm a good person. I was feeling ashamed of myself for being there and doing the work and trying to find excuses to stay put. So my self-efficacy and my self-concept were really far apart, and I really felt out of sorts that whole year, and I started to get negative self-talk. My imposter syndrome came in a lot more. Whereas where I'm in workplaces where there's that nice overlap, I feel relatively invincible, sometimes to my detriment, but relatively invincible, and can sort of grow and encourage others as well. So applying it to those organizations, leadership behaviors, if we want our leaders to be being authentic, actually, this is really important, making sure they are confident in who they are and proud of who they're being. Authenticity, as I mentioned, creating inclusive environments. Actually, we want everybody to feel this way. So if we're trying to force someone to be someone they're not going to feel included, wanted, like they belong. So actually, we want people to feel they can bring their full self, who they are, to work. I currently work with someone who has a diagnosis, I can't say that word suddenly, a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And in my world, I don't care. I want to be a safe space for her so that she can come and be her best. And she said she's operating the best in this business because for the first time, it's not being held against her and it's not being thrown back at her or used as a weapon against her. So she's having less episodes of the condition where it sort of makes her feel she's not being her best self because she feels safe to be who she is. So it can really help. Our next person is Barbara Fredrickson. So I mentioned before about Seligman, the P of PERMA being positive emotions. Barbara Fredrickson is really focused on those positive emotions. So I'll let you have that moment to read. So Fredrickson's research is very focused on positive emotions and the impact these have on us. We all should know that stress has physical impacts. Stress makes us tense. It makes our muscles sore. It gives us headaches. Positive emotions can equally have a positive impact too. But from a work perspective, Fredrickson built this broaden and build theory. And the idea is if we experience positive emotions, that is going to open up our minds to be able to have creative thoughts, innovative ideas. And that's going to keep building and building out, which means we're going to become more resilient because we're going to increase our skills, our knowledge, the support of people around us. And she saw it as this sort of ever-going funnel of growth of the more positive emotions we experience, the more we're going to feel successful. Again, if we apply this at work, if we're saying we want people to be creative and innovative, they need to feel safe to do that. And positive emotions can help open that up for people. Improving resilience. I don't know the amount of businesses that say, I want my people to be more resilient. Actually, getting them to focus on the positives can really help build this. Again, that interpersonal relationships, if I'm talking to you positively, it's going to make you feel good. It's going to make everybody grow in their sort of confidence, their comfort, and make it that universal language. It's going to improve team dynamics because, again, if we're using positive emotions, it's going to feel nice to be around you. We've all had that person in our team who's just constantly negative, constantly puts us down, and it drains you. Whereas that positive energy helps build a team. Fredrickson actually defined 10 emotions that she saw as the 10 positive emotions that were important for people to be feeling. And I really love talking about these because how often does someone talk to you and say, when was the last time you felt serenity? Tell me about the last time that you were in awe of something. And actually, they're nice things to talk about. And I want to practice that right now. I'd love to actually get everyone in the chat just to take a moment and share. I'd love you to tell me, when was the last time that you experienced joy?
It's probably worrying, isn't it? If people have to think about when the last time they experienced joy.
I'm asking them to switch modes from listening to doing that.
Yeah. Well, I don't mind sharing. It's a personal one. Last time I watched my son playing rugby and he scored a try, and it was the first try that I have seen him score. Although he's played rugby for years, which makes me sound like an awful mother, but if he's playing for school or, sometimes I'm not there. And it was amazing. And the joy lasted for me. So obviously it was his proud moment, but I experienced it as well. So that was very joyful for me.
That's lovely. We've got some lovely ones in the chat as well. Arrival of my new niece. That's lovely. Hope you're having some lovely cuddles. Today, my daughter called just to say she wanted to call me. That's lovely. That must have felt so good. That's the relationship I hope to have with my daughter as she gets older. Rode on the river this morning. Such a lovely morning and guilt-free time away from the office. Oh, I can imagine that was lovely. A WhatsApp message from my sister on holiday with a video of my 4-year-old niece. That's lovely. How do we feel when we hear these things, though, when we talk about these positive, this feeling of joy?
Well, it's made me smile instantly. Just be connecting with it, but also hearing everybody else's thinking, oh, that's nice.
My son receiving a thank you from the boss. Oh, sorry, Yvonne, go for it.
I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, I think it just gives you a boost of dopamine, a bit of cortisol. It just runs through you a little bit.
Yeah.
When you get to hear something like that.
It does. And cortisol's good for us.
Yeah.
And that dopamine. Not too much cortisol.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
No, you're great.
Lower that.
But yeah, my son receiving a thank you from the boss regarding a new project. And I like that as well, because you're probably experiencing pride. And pride's one I find really interesting because a lot of people, it's a deadly sin. People sometimes feel a bit uncomfortable to express pride, but actually we deserve to take pride in what we do. We should feel proud of ourselves. So that's when I like to really encourage people. I like to ask people, when did you last feel pride because it pushes them to do it. And I think everyone deserves it. Watching my dog doing Zoomies today because she was so excited.
I love that. I love seeing my dog do that.
I experienced joy when shadowing a year 7 class and the children engaging and asking questions in history. That's lovely. Oh, thank you, Sarah. My presentation bringing lots of joy. I'm a big smiler. I try and bring the energy. So thank you very much. But yeah, these emotions are really powerful. And there's some research out there you may be familiar with that says there's a balance of, if you're giving feedback, that the weight of one negative piece of feedback is equivalent to 2 pieces of feedback. And this isn't actually scientifically verified, and it actually came from Fredrickson's world, but it stayed as a theory, this idea that actually negativity can be really heavy as an emotion. So actually we have to cultivate the positive emotions. Thank you all for sharing. I really appreciate that. 2 more to go. So this one is a very work relevant one. So I'll leave this up on the screen for a moment. This is Ryan and Desi. So as I said, very specifically work related, because it connects so much into what is our motivation, what motivates people. It really reminds me of Dan Pink's drive theory, which is quite a popular version of this theory. And it's a great engaging video on YouTube to show people if anyone wants to watch it. It's the same theory. He's just packaged it slightly differently. But it's this idea that actually as humans, we have 3 basic needs. We want to feel competent. We want to gain mastery and control of our lives by learning to be capable, learning to do what we need to do. And that actually this is really important to well-being. If we don't feel capable, actually that our self-perception is going to be lower, our self-esteem will be lower. It's an important part. Autonomy. We want to feel in control of our own life, behaviours and goals. Parents' evening last night, I got to go and read my daughter's books. She's been listening to my husband's wild theories a bit too much because it said, what's your view of the world? And she went, that we're all imaginary and someone is playing with us. And I was a bit like, oh, crikey. But in that world, we're not autonomous as beings. Everything's planned out for us. We're not making decisions. Actually, as creatures, we're individuals. We like to believe we're making our own choices. And again, relatedness. We want to feel like we belong and have a connection with others. I imagine many people have had that moment where you feel really uncomfortable. You just don't feel like you belong here. You're not wanted. You're not got those similar behaviors. So again, when we're thinking about those organizations, that engagement to be there and bring the best work of their lives, their motivation to come into work and do that and to give that to the workplace. You know, are we helping their personal growth? Are we helping them feel autonomous in the work they're doing? Authenticity, again, if we want people to be bringing them their real selves to work, actually we can tap into this and help them feel like they are being their true selves. And personal growth, giving them those opportunities to develop their skills, develop their competence, their autonomy. And finally, that relatedness into personal relationships. Actually, I remember one of my first jobs, I knew it was time to leave because who I am, today I'm with you, I'm not wearing makeup, I'm wearing jeans, that's who I am. I'm a jeans and no makeup person. I was wearing a lot of fake tan and fake eyelashes. And I remember going to fit in with my colleagues. And I remember thinking, this isn't quite all right. I don't fit here. This isn't quite right. Actually, where we're changing ourselves too much and stopping being authentic, it's possibly not the right place for us. I loved that job, but I put far too much effort into trying to just fit in. Right. Last piece of theory then. We're talking about, oh no, one more, sorry, belonging. Belonging is really important here too. So our last key thinker is actually someone who's nothing to do with positive psychology. So I'm being a little tenuous here, bringing her in, but this is Beverly Alimo-Metcalfe. So I get a bit geeky for Alimo-Metcalfe. I absolutely love the work she's done. She aligns with some principles of positive psychology, particularly she has a real focus on authentic leadership, increasing self-awareness, and the positive impact of effective leadership on an organizational culture and employee well-being. So she links really nicely in with what we're talking about. Alimo-Metcalfe is best known for doing one of the biggest leadership studies in a British business. A lot of the ones we read in books actually are on American companies. So she's done the largest, still the largest today in British organizations. And she was focusing on what are the qualities that make for a great leader. And these are the qualities, and she broke them down to these areas of leading and developing individuals, personal qualities and values, leading the way forward, and leading and developing the organization. There is a really fun activity you can run with leaders on this. And I'm happy to share it if people want it, where essentially you give them a list of qualities and you ask them to pick which they think are the top 7. And she ranks them as being which are the most powerful. Like I'll always remember one of them is charismatic. And I had a leader who really loved the fact he was charismatic and thought that was his best quality. And he was devastated to find out it wasn't one of the top qualities. So it's a really good exercise to get people to remember these. But the number one quality of a leader actually is showing genuine concern for others. And that leads to more profitability in those businesses, more productivity. It has really lasting business impact. And another really surprising one is networking. That surprises people. Actually, what employees value is if their leader doesn't know the answer, that their leader has someone within their network they can go to because they've developed that network to help get the answer. But again, we see things coming up again around that showing genuine concern, encouraging people, inspiring others. And so to apply this in organizations, it's really about those leadership behaviors. That is the place to focus it. But again, it's going to lead to higher engagement, motivated employees, people being authentic, your leaders being authentic, and it's going to improve your business performance. So I like to pull this in as a key thinker because I think it really does apply. Now, you may have heard of this phase. So we're going to move more into this. How do we apply this at work and away from the key thinkers? But I really want to take a moment on this because a square peg in a round hole, I believe all human beings are great, talented individuals, but they have to be in the right environment that suits them. And this is sort of what we've been hearing is actually everyone is an individual, and what's true and great for them and brings them meaning and purpose is going to be different to the next person. I've hired people in the past who didn't fit in, who were square pegs and they were struggling. But I've then watched them go on to their next role where they've flourished and grown and succeeded because they were in the right environment. So it's important when we're thinking about company cultures, we're not trying to create something that just everyone's going to be able to be okay in. It's got to be right for our business. And actually, there will be individuals where who we are isn't right for them, and they deserve to be somewhere where it is right for them. So I think that's really important just to know. And something to help us achieve this is character strengths, which is something Martin Seligman was founded for developing. I think I was hearing this in HR long before I was aware of this. It's actually play to people's strengths. Strengths is really important. This is where this comes from. So Seligman developed what's known as the VIA Institute of Character and created these 24 character strengths that you can see around the edge of the wheel that are broken down into 6 categories, which is sort of the humanity, courage, knowledge, justice, temperance, and transcendence. The idea is we actually have all of these strengths within us. All of us can do all 24 of these things, but to lesser and greater ability. And there are ones that we will have as favorites. It might be you are amazing at bravery, but you don't enjoy it. And that's okay. You can be strong in something and not enjoy it. So what we want to focus people on is the things that they feel they're at their best in and they feel great doing. So it's got to be something they enjoy and that they can do really well. For myself, I feel when I do this assessment, my top strengths come out as leadership in that justice section, kindness and humanity, integrity, encourage, and optimism in transcendence. And they're things that I, really connect for me. I'd love it again if everyone could take a moment and look at these and have a think about which of these you think just instinctively might be 1 or 2 of your sort of top strengths. Feel free to pop them in the chat or say them out loud if you feel comfortable.
Feels strange, doesn't it, analysing yourself? I think mine would be optimism and probably gratitude.
I like those. And optimism is a really core part of positive psychology as well. Actually, there's lots of studies about how important optimism is.
Yeah, and probably I'd like to say integrity and fairness.
Nice. Yvonne, I see you've come off mute.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like if we look at the sort of character strengths, the humanity and transcendence, because I'm all about, I do a lot of yoga, so I try to bring it just in every day around me, you know, and it just sort of helps me get through a day. I do HR and it's quite stressful, I'm not going to lie.
Understatement.
Yeah, and you've got to do it with a bit of humility for people, and you've got to understand
Yes.
people, haven't you? So I think for me, it's those two.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
In the chat, we've got humility, creativity, and fairness. We've got fairness, enthusiasm, leadership. We've got a bit of a theme here for the fairness, kindness, and perseverance. Humanity and justice, I believe all are important. You're right, Sarah, they are all important. And as I said, we have all of these inside us and we can tap into them as and when we need to, but often we'll bring more to the surface sort of more frequently, and that's probably our comfort zone strengths. But we're all different, and you can see already we've got these similarities, and it could be especially where we're working in similar fields, some things will come out more frequently, but we're all different and we all have different strengths that we will be bringing, which make us so valuable as different individuals. So I want to get really into the nitty-gritty of how we can be applying this at work. Oh, just noticed there's another one in the chat. Optimism and humility. Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, lovely. So thinking about creating positive cultures, we talk about culture a lot, especially in that HR world, and it's intangible. It's hard to say our culture is cheese. You can't say it's one specific thing. Actually, it's intangible, but it's in those stories that people tell, how people speak about you as a business, and it's how when people hear it, they react and respond to it. Some statistics I found really interesting. So currently 23% of prospective employees state that company values and culture exert that most significant factor for them to decide whether to accept a job. I've had many calls with candidates over the last year where actually that last thing to get them over the line is it the right culture for me? And 55% of employees indicated they'd resign from a new job if that culture did not align with their personal values and expectations. So our cultures are really having an impact. And, you know, as different generations are coming in, they're caring more and more about these factors. So it's becoming more and more prevalent, which is why I want to talk about this and care about this. So I want to start with values. And I think what I find really interesting is 10, 15 years ago, company values were maybe a bit unique to have. And now it's very common. Most companies probably would say, oh, we've got some company values, but not always going well. And you see some common challenges. Often you can say, you know, what are your values? They're on the wall. There's a lovely sticker. We put it on the wall, job done. And that's as far as it's gone. Or I can name some of them. Yesterday I was in a primary school and I was telling Eloise I was role-playing HR with them, doing values. And I went, what are your school values? And discovered they have 18. At which point it took us a long time to name them all because the kids were just rehashing ones that had already been said because it was too many and it didn't resonate for them all. People aren't sure where they came from. They couldn't actually tell you this is where the values came from. It's just I got told those are the values, you know, that's it. And finally, they couldn't tell you what it means. I've had them in the past where you're going, well, what does that mean? I have a great example. I worked in a school where they opened it as a brand new school and they set their values. And one of their values was tolerance because they wanted it to be an inclusive environment where we were tolerant of everybody who we were amongst. I don't really love the word tolerant, but that was what they chose. And when I joined them, they were actually at a really critical stage. Things had gone quite wrong. And one of the things that had gone very wrong was behaviours, and they had zero behaviour management structure in place. And I went, oh, so you're tolerant of everything. And they had this moment of going, oh, yeah, actually, our people had interpreted it of, oh, we're just tolerant of people behaving badly. We don't tackle that. And so they ended up redoing their values. It was sort of a much better approach. So actually making sure people are aligned and can say what it means in the right way is really important. And I have a bit of a framework that I follow for creating company values. So what I would say is define them together. I think it's really important to get the people you're working with to be involved in defining them. You know, what makes working with each other, what makes us such a great place to work? What do we love about working together? Get people's hearts brought into this process and bringing that, what they value about each other. So again, play to that positive emotion. Tell some stories. Actually, we love telling stories, and stories are a really great learning technique. If you can tell stories about your values, that's going to stick with people. So when we did X, that was us living this great value of ours, and people will then remember those stories. And I'll give an example in a moment of that. Build them into your regular processes and systems. Actually, the more they are prevalent, that's going to land well. So think about your appraisals. Is it, you know, when did this person display this value? Their 360s, how frequently do we see them? The company I'm in currently, we actually every quarter, we do a 360 and it's how frequently do you see them displaying the values? And it's genuinely a performance metric. We track is actually how much is someone living the values. Recruit with them. Actually be looking for people that share your values, that are going to only grow it and build it further. But tell people about your values. So those stories we mentioned earlier, share those stories. I will sit in interviews and go, these are our 6 values. And I'll tell you a story about each one that really brings to life where I've seen it happen. And I'm, you know, we have so many stories, I tailor it. If I'm speaking to a consultant, I'll tell you stories of when the consulting team did this. So make it relevant and engaging for them. And then finally revisit it, because we do evolve. You know, it might be we've grown and actually we've brought new people in. Are we still the same people that we were when we started this? I've done this recently where the values have been created in 2019. We reviewed them. And actually, yes, they still aligned. We tweaked the wording on 2 of them because we felt that evolved slightly, but it was still the same concept and theme. And then we kept growing with it even further. So I think company values are super important. It's that part where we're connecting emotionally with why am I here to do what I do and how can I be at my best? How can I achieve all these key things we've been thinking about? But it's got to be done well, or else it just becomes another gimmick that sits off in the corner. And to build on this, we talked about achievement being a key part of well-being as well. I think appreciation is super important in cultures. I know Reward Gateway are really pushing this message this year, and there's people like Deborah Corey out there who's a great speaker who is talking a lot about this as well. These stats come from Gallup. So it's saying that actually 45 well-recognized employees are 45% less likely to have left 2 years later because they feel valued, they feel appreciated. And employees who strongly agree that they get recognition. So in the Gallup engagement survey, they have something called the Q12. It's 12 questions in theory that define engagement. One of the questions is, in the last 7 days, I've received praise or recognition. So where people have strongly agreed to that question, they're 5 times more likely to be engaged. So this can be really powerful for getting great outcomes from your people. And I want to share an example of how I'm currently working with appreciation. So we have Slack as our internal comms channel. There are other ways to do this, absolutely. And if you have ways you do this, please share it in the chat, because that would be great for people to see the different ways. But we have a public praise channel. So any individual can give praise to their peers for great work that they've been doing. And as you can, these is public. So there's a phrase, praise in public, chastise in private. It's there, it's public, and people can react with emojis and they can reply to it. It becomes a really public experience. So people get a lot of dopamine hits from getting recognized and really value it. And we put a lot of work into how can we keep this going and everyone buy into this, but it's a really core part of how we appreciate each other. It's owned by everyone. A lot of people think praise has to be owned by managers, and managers then get a bit odd with it because they're going, but I'm just thanking them for doing what they're meant to do. Actually, if everybody owns it, it becomes a shared responsibility. And also, we tag our values to these. So actually, where people are doing great work, we're then celebrating that they've lived our values in it. And these become the stories that you're telling to embed it and get people used to it. Eloise, I can see you can come up. If you come off mute, you're going to say something.
Well, no, just because you invited people to say, what you do and share. So we don't have Slack or anything like that, and we're really small, but we have an end of month team meeting, And in every team meeting, we start with gratitude. So we all have to go around and do something, share something that we're grateful for. But then the second part of it is we have to show gratitude and appreciation for somebody else in the team and share some positivity about what somebody else has done. And since we've been doing it over the last, I don't know, probably 4 months or so, it's really nice to hear different people thanking other people and noticing little things that they do.
Yeah. And it makes you feel just so valued for what you do.
Yeah.
We have our weekly leadership team. We have a structure that we follow, and we have a segment. It is appreciations for each other in this group. And we each have to take a turn saying, that person, I really appreciate what you did for me last week, because we wanted to build our relationships. We were like, that's a really important part of doing it. So we built it into our structures. Appreciation can be super valuable. And like I said, again, it pulls us back to our values, keeps that message going, becomes our story. So I think it's got lots of angles to be useful. The next thing I want to think about was well-being. Post-COVID, well-being has become much more prevalent in businesses. And I think a lot of us probably were paying attention to it pre-COVID, but post-COVID, business leaders suddenly got it and it became much more prevalent. And actually future generations are going to expect this only more in the business. I found this really funny. I was telling Eloise this earlier, and I'll share it here. Yesterday, I went into my daughter's school. All the children in primary school, they want to grow up to be a YouTuber or a footballer. So the school wanted some careers talks to help them learn some other careers. And I thought, how do I talk about HR for an hour? So I created a simulation where I got them all to come and work for me as chocolate tasters. And we went through different cycles. So some of them got promoted, they got paid. I inducted them all. We created our values, and I did an engagement survey. So I said, stand up if you love your job, sit down if you don't love your job. And I spoke to the people who were sat down, and I got some great suggestions. Someone went, well, I did it to a year 2 class and year 5, and both groups went, well, I'm eating a lot of chocolate, so I'm not being that healthy. I think it's important that, we have some healthy snacks as well, and maybe that you encourage us to do some exercise. I was like, you get it. This is great. So I think, these well-beings, I know it's so hard to explain HR had to do. Sorry, someone in the chat said they love the classroom example, often struggle to explain to children. Absolutely. I was like, how do I make this? How do I explain the whole thing? So well-being is really prevalent, and younger generations are even more conscious of their well-being. There's talk that is mental health in its worst state because there were more diagnoses taking place. But I also wonder, is it because more people feel able to come forward because we have more of a society that allows us to talk about this than maybe there previously was? I don't know the answer, but it's something I'm curious about. So Great Place to Work defines a wellbeing strategy as a plan of action that we create to safeguard or improve the wellbeing of our employees. And I think that's really important. This idea of safeguard is that sense of keep them where they are, keep it at a reasonable level, or improve it where we can. And I like to take a pause for a moment just to sort of show. This is from the Mental Health First Aid website. This is this is a diagnosis metric, and it's the mental health continuum. And I like to pull this up because actually on these axes, we've got serious mental illness versus no mental illness symptoms. So this is the idea that actually you've been diagnosed with a mental illness, mental health condition that might be very serious. And there are degrees of how much that impacts you, from this sense of actually having poor mental health. So you might have been, if we take my employee who's been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, she has a serious mental health illness. Where she has poor mental health, where maybe she's not feeling supported at work, she's going to be languishing, she's not going to be doing well at work. But just because she has a diagnosis doesn't mean actually her mental health can be optimal, can be good, she can be living a great life still. And that's that sort of area where we're targeting for people, whether they have a diagnosis or don't have a diagnosis and have no symptoms of illness. Our goal is to be helping people flourish, because we're not trained to fix somebody who is struggling with their mental health. We have tips, we have tricks, we have ways to point them in the right direction. But the focus of our agenda of our wellbeing agenda is how can we be helping people be moving always towards flourishing? So here are some questions to sort of consider for that wellbeing strategy. And this is from the Great Place to Work, Wellbeing at Work, sort of what they say the 5 areas an agenda should focus on. So that job design, do we have really clear job expectations? We talked earlier about wanting achievement, wanting mastery. Do we have really clear expectations for how they can do that? Where I am now, we don't do job descriptions, but everyone has 5 accountabilities. So you have 5 things you can say really easily, I'm accountable for that. And that leads you to be able to do your job. And as long as that's your focus, you're doing the best you can do. People want to know how they can grow in their role. They want to see there's opportunity to develop that mastery, grow their personal skills. Work-life balance. How do we trust people with their time? Actually, that's a real culture thing. Is, are we clock focused? Are we looking at every minute they've spent, whether it's billable? And each culture is going to be different because based on what they need. But actually, that sets a tone of work-life balance for everyone. What sensitive leave policies do we have? You know, how understanding are we if someone has someone in their family die? Is it you know, I'm very sorry that happened, but you've got to get back to work. Actually, are we looking at their mental well-being and supporting them? How can we create structures for that? And this isn't, you have to do it one way. These are just questions to be asking yourself is, are they right for our culture, for our business? How do we allow people to switch off? Psychological safety, again, this has become a very popular one, very rightly. It's become a very popular phrase in business in the last few years. But how do we make sure everyone has a voice? You know, how do we make sure that it's not just the loudest people who are getting promoted, who are getting a say? How do we keep everybody involved so they can feel that who they are is wanted, belongs, and can have a say? How do we handle failure? You know, actually, a real good part of psychological safety is knowing that we can fail safely. We've done initiatives before. We had, what was it? We had Marvelous Mistakes in March that we do every year, where actually we celebrate when someone tries something new, whether it goes right or wrong. And then at the end of the month, we vote for which one we thought was the best and we give that person a prize. But we're like, yay, you tried something, whether it worked or not. How do we handle conflict? You know, do we shy away from a conflict and make someone feel that, you know, that always that fear of what's going to happen to me? Or do we have a world where actually you can be really honest and you can talk to people? These can impact our psychological safety. Our mental, physical, and financial health, these are the sessions where we're going to do that education session, bring someone in to talk to you about it. And Yvonne mentioned yoga. What I find really interesting is things like yoga, mindfulness, grounding. They are techniques that positive psychologists use. They tap into them and use them because they're really valuable in these areas. They're really good for helping people with their mental and physical health. So that positive psychology leans on those quite a lot. And there's something called somatic psychology, which is the psychology of the body and how actually the body can be telling us how our mind is operating as well. So again, you have a headache, you maybe feel you have a headache, your body is hurting because you're feeling an emotion of stress. So there's a lot out there as well about physical psychology too. And then finally, those interpersonal relationships. We're coming back to this again, that those relationships at work are important. So what structures do we have to build connections at work? You know, maybe it's about your in-person time. If you're remote, how are you helping people build connections and relationships? And also, when we go back to strengths, how are we supporting teams to recognize each other's strengths? Where I am, we use Insights Discovery as a psychometric tool. And we really lean on that power that brings for people and helping everyone understand and appreciate each other's ways through sort of insights so that they can work best as a team and lean on each other and lean on those strengths and not be beating someone up because it's not theirs. I always joke, I'm not the best for detail. I have to put a lot of brain power into detail. I'm great at bringing energy. Detail, I've got to really work at that. So I don't need beating up and being told you're not very good at detail. I know that. I've got my ways for trying to work around this. But instead, praise me where you do see me doing well and encourage me and support me. There's in terms of time, I've got one more area I want to pick into, which I think is really interesting. And I was reading more about this earlier today. And that's diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion. And I choose those words on purpose because I think, I'm a big fan of equity over equality. This idea that actually it's not about just give everyone the same tools. Actually, it's be trying to give equity to correct where somebody does not have the same tools, has not had the same opportunities so that they can have a level playing field. And what's interesting is there's actually been criticism of positive psychology, and it's valid, that a lot of the research of psychology is focused on the Western world and typically it is predominantly white. And, you'll also get research around, I could get very started on neurodiversity and, autism, traditional traits were based on men. So there are many women who went undiagnosed for years because the psychology focused on white males and how it presented. And so there were many women who were failed by that as a structure. Anyway, there's a lot of criticism of positive psychology in this area. But for me, what I pull it back to is that actually we want to be, as in our world of professions, we want to be focusing on the strengths of every individual and caring about who they are, what their culture, their religions, their beliefs have taught them, and helping them feel they can bring it to work and still thrive with it. Seligman argues, so he did this with a person called Peterson, they believe that these 24 character strengths and the 6 virtues actually are present in all societies. And that was something they really focused on, and that they're valued by all cultural groups. That was very much a goal for them of this, was that this could be diverse across lots of different cultures. So hopefully this tool actually brings value, and it's been assessed and affirmed that, yes, this is relevant across populations, but there are interesting factors in here that make it different. So for example, where you have cultures that focus on us as you know, if we think about perhaps China, where there might be a focus on being part of the state, contributing to the state, there's a culture called collectivism, where actually we might think about where we say, you know, I want to be a good human. It might be, I want to be a good human as defined in my country, versus I want to be a good human that I define as an individual. So we get individualistic and collective cultures, and that is valid. That is whatever somebody's culture is. We have no right to turn around and say, yours is wrong, mine is better at any stage. So it's about how do we create spaces where people can still feel their true selves. And within our culture, as a work culture, there is science that says people can and actually thrive having blended cultures brought together, so they can bring themselves and join our workplace culture and still thrive. But again, we want people to feel good in it. We're not trying to force them to become something they are not. And, you know, I come back to that. Humanistic psychology, Carl Rogers and Maslow created the belief that humans as individuals, we're unique beings and we should be recognized and treated as such. We're not trying to do broad brushstrokes. We're trying to create something that really values different people. Conscious of time, there is a lot more we could touch on. We could talk about personal growth strategies, company purpose, how we design an office, leadership development. There's so much you can tap into in leadership development, mentoring. There's a lot more we could dig into, but I tried to focus where I felt it would add more value. So I need to press pause, because I'd love to just sort of bring this really down to a close now and sort of really say, what questions do people have that hopefully I can answer with our last 7 minutes. So I'm going to stop sharing now.
Brilliant.
So I love questions. So yeah, what questions?
Thank you, Tillie. That was fabulous. Yeah, if anybody's got any questions, if you want to unmute yourself, you can, or you can put them into the chat box if you don't want to share. Sorry, I was a bit slow on the chat box. I was so busy making notes and interested in what you were saying. I missed some of the chat. So, but thank you everybody for inputting. It's just a lot of information, isn't there? And thinking about how you implement it and the difference that all.
And there's so many angles and routes you can go down. And I would just say, be curious.
Where would you suggest to start, Tillie? Because there is a lot. Where do you think where would people start to get the best results?
I think if there was any, thank you, Yvonne. If there was any of those thinkers that have intrigued you, I'd start there and start on their piece of theory. If it's connected for you, I'd start there. Like Seligman is the father of it all. You can learn about his basics. I actually don't like him as a human, I've found. I read his books and go, you're not my kind of person. And that's fine, because we're all unique individuals. So find someone that resonates for you and probably start there and start thinking about how you can expand it and evolve it from there and reach out and how can I develop this bit more. And you'll start to see that all these theories start to cross over with each other. So you'll start to pick up the different thinkers, but there are so many different routes. And the qualification I'm doing is through the Positive Psychology Guild. And they do pathways on positive psychology for organizations, coaching as a whole career, being a positive psychology coach. So there's lots of different routes you can take for it.
And what about, but if you're thinking about, right, we want to make a more positive internal culture at work, where do you think is the best place to start? Would it be with the values?
I think values are a really great starting point. but you have to start with getting your leaders on board. Your leaders have to actually be open to this. And I've had leads in the past who will play lip service to values because someone's told them it's a good idea. They've got to actually be bought in and see the value and see this is going to help them have a better business that leads to the outcomes they want. So you have to start with the leadership, but then, yeah, I think values are a really great starting point in getting people to be thinking in those positive emotions and those sorts of phrases.
Okay, fab. So I was just looking at the
No,
comments.
I was going to say,
Thanks, Sarah. I will have a look at that, Sarah. Thank you.
yeah, and Merydale, I'd love to do a workshop. That's part of what my goal is. I'd like to be going to small organisations and helping them create positive organisation cultures. So the goal is to get there, and this is sort of actually one of my first stages of trying to do this.
Well, you've done really well today. You've been absolutely brilliant. So if people don't have any other questions, then I'll close the meeting just to say thank you so much, Tillie. It was really great, really informative. I've known you a long time, and it's been great having you as part of the huddle and then talking on the huddle. So thank you. If anybody has any subjects that they would particularly like us to get a guest speaker on or to talk about themselves, then feel free to get in contact with me. But thank you so much, Tillie, and I hope to see you all again very soon.